Hi, I'm Paul Marcel. I wanted to monologue today about the Festool Domino Joining System. I'd like to do an overview of the tool at first, talk about its various parts and how you go to use it. Most of this stuff you can see in reading specifications and watching some of the Festool TV videos on it. But what I wanted to also do is then I'm going to follow it up by doing some demos showing you how I use the tool and a couple of the trade-offs that you can have with ease of use versus stronger joints, how to do assemblies faster if you'd like if you're lacking clamps and such. So I hope that there'll be some takeaway even for people who have been using the system for a number of years. So the system itself comes in a Sys2. Now the unit itself is broken up into two parts. You've got the fence assembly here on the front, and then you've got the motor unit on the back that actually does the routing. The two are removable, and let me remove that so you can see. This is a wrench that comes with the kit, and we use it to actually change the bit that I'll show you later. But there's a little tiny lever in here. It's recessed so that you don't actually hit it while you're doing work and then the fence pops off. So you just give it a little bit of a kick, and then now the fence unit just slides right off. Comes with makes that nice little champagne noise for you too. Now there's two rods here that insert into the rod holes in the main unit, and you can see that it's nice enough that one of the rods is longer than the other one to make it a lot easier to put in. You put that one in first, and once you've got that one going, then you can just drop it into the second one. Now, the fence has a lot to talk about, so I'm going to save that till we get through the motor unit, which is actually the simplest part of this whole thing. So it comes with a power switch, and then it also comes with a depth setting here. Now the depth setting is when you're doing the plunge into that fence unit, it's going to stop the unit from going too far. The system itself uses a number of different size dominoes. The loose tenons that you use for the joinery. Now each different size domino has a different size bit, and that has to do with the radius and the thickness of the domino itself. So this width setting here that's on the front, there's three settings. One of them is that it's going to be the exact width of the domino itself, and then there are two other ones that set progressively larger widths, and I'll show you that in a couple visuals that I've created. And that's for helping with alignment and such. Now the bottom of the unit has this kind of fancy head. This is actually the cutter head, so the motor engages to this unit here, and what it does is it'll reciprocate, so it'll pass back and forth as you're doing your plunge, and it spins the bit for doing the cutting just like a regular router. In a way, what it's doing is that you're holding the router still and you're doing the plunge, and it's simulating what you used to do with your regular router by putting it on top of the material, and you'd do successive passes with a bit to try plowing out the mortise. In this case here, it's taking care of the side-to-side motion to do the cutting. Now that said, that also means that this bit, which is a custom bit that's made for these units, is doing a lot of the cutting on its side. And of course it's relatively thin, so you're not going to want to plow too fast and put too much stress on the side of the bit, but we'll be able to see that a little bit more when I do some of the demonstrations. Now my fence unit is the original fence unit that came out with the domino, and that is the one that has pins for registration, and I'll describe what those are used for. You may have the newer model which has paddles, but otherwise this fence is the same for both, other than that difference. So everything I say is going to be relevant also to the paddle model except where noted. Now since this acts as a registration, the hole here is where the bit exits, so the mortise is going to be created right here in front of that. So we are going to want to be able to do things like set where from the top surface of a board you're going to put the mortise. That's where this part of the fence comes in, where you can tilt it down. Your board is going to be here, and then you can set the height of this. So you can set how far from the top reference surface you're going to use to have your mortise. Now this angle, of course, I use it almost all the time in 90 degree or 0 degree, but you can set it in between if you're doing, say, something like if you were trying to do a Cooper planter and you wanted to use the dominoes to help you with alignment, this would come out great. Now the fence also has a height adjustment. There's one version of it here, and then there's one version of it here. What this is it sets the height, it sets the distance from the center of this mortise to this reference surface. And now, why are there two scales? This one here is the absolute number. So this is the total depth distance from here to the center of the bit. This other one is a convenience scale. And what it is it's set to the thickness of the stock that you're putting this mortise into. So if you're using some common thicknesses, like in this case here I have it set to 22 millimeters. If your stock is 22 millimeters thick, you can set it to 22 millimeters and do your plunge, and it's going to put the mortise dead in the middle. Now of course that means that it's 11 millimeters down from the reference surface, but Festool decides that while you're concentrating on mortise and tenon joinery, you shouldn't have to do division. What you often see when people use the domino is that they'll draw lines to indicate where they want to put the center of the mortise. The way that you do that lineup is right through this plastic window. You'll see that there's a center point here, and there's actually a hole there to make it a little easier to see through. So if this plastic ever clouds up on you, you can still see right through there, and you can use that as a crosshairs to get to your line. And then of course there's these other scales here that show you certain distances away from that center point. And that can often be very useful when you're trying to, say, take a piece of stock that you're going to put a hole into the end of. You can just use that scale to figure out where it is going to be in the center. Just the same number of distance lines off of both sides. It's handy when you're doing a one-off and you don't want to figure it all out, although there's a number of better ways to do that. Now you can see that there's some triangles here up on the top scale, and I believe these are a little bit different on the version of the base that has the paddles, but the same idea exists. What this is if we look at the bottom of the unit, this triangle here lines up with the center of the mortise. This triangle here lines up with the inside edge of this pin or paddle, and this one to the inside edge of the pin or paddle that's on this side. Now, the bottom of the base has a number of really good reference lines as well. This line here is similar to the triangle, except a little bit more precise. This is a line to the inside edge of that pin, as well as this one to the inside edge of that pin. The idea being that you're going to be taking your stock, and you're going to be butt-ending it up to the pin or paddle on that side. Well, that's where the edge of your stock is going to line up. Then there's a line here to indicate the center of the domino hole. And then there's some extra ones here that show you where the different widths of the dominoes when you're doing the plunge will line up. So this is really useful when you go to use the domino in the vertical position, because you can use those to line up where the hole is going to go. There are some machined surfaces on here, some of them that are very good for reference. The distance from the very bottom of this unit to the center of this domino, of the mortise in the width, is 10 millimeters, and you can count on that. So this is exceptionally useful when there are certain situations where you're going to have to place the domino down on a flat surface and plunge into another flat surface. You know that the distance is going to be 10 millimeters up. And you can actually use this if you want to, say, put some shelves midway through another board and you need a reference surface. Well, there you go. You've got one, because you can't fold down this top when you're in the middle of a large field. These pins will fit into a domino hole. So after you've mortised the first hole, you can put this pin into the hole, that hole, and hook it onto the inside edge and make a stable distance across. Again, that's going to be way too close. And with the paddles, that doesn't work. The paddles do not fit into the holes. However, there is a trim stop that you can get, and what these do is they attach to the side of this fence unit, and they provide you a pin that you can use for reference. So this will fit into the domino holes. So you can set, using the scale, the distance that you want from the center of this mortise to the next one. So you can march across. So in that sense, if you had, say, two pieces that you want to attach as panels, you don't need it for the strength in the case of a panel, but because of the long grain to long grain glue surface, but you just want it for alignment. Well, there you could hook one edge of the panel onto this side of the fence, right, for the first hole, and then after that you march across using these holes, and you have that set way out to the edge. And now you're going to be putting a domino, say, every 6 or 7 inches apart, and they're going to be very lined up. You're not going to have a single line, pencil line on there. Now the way these attach, there's a small dovetail notch and dovetail notch on this side here. Now this is going to fit like that into the dovetail notch, and it provides you with the pin out in front. So once you slide that in there, you just crank on the knob, and now it's locked in place. And then you can adjust this, and you can slide that up and down. And it's got little teeth in there so that it really registers and it won't be moving on you. So that's the reason I shouldn't be cranking down on it. So the idea would be that you would set both of these up to the same number, and then you can march across one panel, putting the mortises about this far apart, and then you'd put this one in to the same number and march across the other side. Now, you probably noticed some blue tape, and you did a stop frame to see what that blue tape says. It turns out that for some reason, and I haven't figured this out, but I don't really care, one of my trim stops, I always have to set it 1 millimeter less than the other side. So I just put some tape on the back of these to remind me of that, so when I do the setup, I take off 1 millimeter to the other side, and then they line up dead perfect. Another accessory for this base allows you to plunge into the ends of rails and stile pieces. Now, you've seen me hold this up, and sure, you can line it up here and count the lines, or you can make a pencil mark there. So they have this accessory here, and what this does is it allows you to set two side-to-side fences on this fence. So now you can simply take the stock and you would put it in between these fences and line it up. Now I currently have these offset, so you would slide this in, lock it down, and once they're locked down, now whenever you want to do another piece, you just slide it in here and it's going to position it dead center. Well, dead center if that's what you set it to. You can set these arbitrarily. So if you wanted to do a wider rail or style piece and you want the mortise to be off on the edge, you can easily do that with this. That's very handy when you're cranking through a lot of them, and I've used this many times in the past. Now oftentimes you're going to need to plow a mortise into the face of a board for whatever situation you have. Now you can see that there's not a great deal of registration. It'd be pretty easy to tip that. Now one of the things that comes with the kit is an extension to the base, and that's what this portion here is. So when you look at the bottom here, there are 2 screws. That's what this locks into. You put those on there. You try doing this while you're on camera, and you're always going to line them up improperly. There we go. So now that you've screwed that in, it actually makes this much more stable, because now I've got all that. So it's a very handy piece. I usually actually keep it on mine when I'm doing a lot of mortises, because sometimes I'll be lazy and not put this on, and then I get something tipped and then I get really grumpy and I have to swear. So keep that thing on. You'll generally be able to do most of your mortises, even the ones where this doesn't help. It just won't be in the way anyway.